Earl Thompson was a guy who started his shift in the pitch-black morning of freezing Chicago, a man raised in the frozen, blood-smelling, gloomy corridors of slaughterhouses. Nobody called him Earl. They called him Slaughterhouse, because Earl would grab 100-kilo beef carcasses with one hand and toss them onto the trucks like they were sacks of cotton. His life had been spent in iron, blood, and bone. He was exactly 105 kilos. This wasn't puffed-up bodybuilding weight. This was pure, hard, ruthless muscle mass, like granite hewn from a quarry. Earl had made Miami's famous, legendary Fifth Street Gym his home turf. He stood in the deepest corner, a dark spot where even the light was afraid to enter. When he locked eyes on the man walking through the door, Muhammad Ali, there wasn't a shred of admiration in his look, only the wild stare of a hungry tiger sizing up its prey. To Earl, Ali wasn't a fighter, he was a balloon pumped up by TV. A showman who hopped around the ring, ran away, danced instead of fighting, and worked his jaw more than his fists. Earl turned to his training partner. He cracked his thick, bull-like neck, and he boomed with that rusty, wheezing voice that drowned out the gym's metallic chaos. "Look at that! Look at that clown people call the world's most dangerous man. All I see is a dried leaf blowing in the wind, a fly. And flies can't headbutt sledgehammers, son." Earl Thompson would bet his life that Ali's speed was smoke and mirrors, and his power was a big lie. To him, there was only one truth in this world. The big one crushes the small one. The heavy one tears apart the light one. And he was the biggest, heaviest sledgehammer this gym had ever seen. But there was something Earl didn't know at the peak of his arrogance. What he was about to experience wouldn't be an ordinary gym brawl. It was going to be a brutal lesson he'd see in his nightmares for the rest of his life, one that would cut to the bone. The sticky, suffocating summer heat of Miami covered everything. The inside of Fifth Street Gym was no different than the waiting room of hell. While the asphalt melted outside, the air inside was heavy with humidity, turning into a thick smoke that was hard to breathe. You weren't pulling air into your lungs. It was like breathing hot water. This place wasn't like those air-conditioned, perfume-smelling social clubs of today. This was an iron temple washed in pain, hope, sweat, and disappointment. The yellow whitewash on the walls carried the fatigue of years. It was peeling and blistering, as if trying to vomit up the violence soaked into it, revealing the bare bricks underneath. The huge industrial fans hanging from the ceiling were spinning, but it was useless. Instead of cooling the air, they just swirled the dust, the smell of dried blood, and that thick, nauseating smell of old leather around the room. The tuck-tuck-tuck sound of the fans mixed with the rhythm of boxes skipping rope, creating a heavy hum that hypnotized you. This chaos had a wild rhythm of its own, the slapping of sweaty skin against skin, the wheezing breaths torn from lungs in pain, the ear-piercing metallic screams of iron plates rubbing against each other, and underneath it all, crackling music from a radio that no one was really listening to. The men here weren't there to look at their muscles in the mirror and show off. They were there to destroy their reflections, to turn themselves into harder, more ruthless weapons. There was Earl, looking like the undisputed ruler of this hell, this kingdom of sweat and iron. He stood before that massive 90-kilo custom-made heavy bag. But this guy wasn't hitting the bag like a boxer. This wasn't technical work. This was an execution. He was hitting it like a demolition crew bringing down a concrete wall with a sledgehammer. When Earl pulled his arm back, the muscles on his back rose up like a mountain range. And when he hit, the thick, rusty chains holding the bag to the ceiling groaned in pain. The metal rings were at the breaking point, screeching. The bag swung up to the ceiling every time, almost horizontal, hanging in the air. The other boxers in the gym, the skinny kids, the old trainers, they all stopped what they were doing and watched him involuntarily, with a mix of fear and respect. Because that's human nature, we always feel admiration for pure, destructive, wild power. Right at the moment, Earl threw one of his most violent strikes, just when the chains were about to snap. The door opened, and Muhammad Ali glided in. He didn't walk, he glided, But this wasn't the cheerful Ali you saw on TV, shouting at cameras, joking with reporters, reading poems. That media mask, that colorful showman, had stayed outside the door. The man who walked in had no jokes, no smile. He had the silence of an assassin, the cold-bloodedness of a surgeon. He was wearing a loose gray sweatsuit, darkened by sweat and sticking to him. He had a simple white towel thrown over his shoulder. There was no famous bounce in his walk, no dance. His feet didn't stomp the ground. It was like gravity worked differently for him, like he was sliding over the surface. Contrary to the loud, earth-shaking presence Earl created, W was silent like a ghost, like smoke. Earl stopped punching the bag. His chest was heaving like a blacksmith's bellows. Sweat dripping from his forehead passed through his bushy, furrowed brows and filled his eyes. Earl wiped the sweat with the back of his glove and locked his eyes on this silent man entering the gym. The gym went ice cold. The music stopped. The ropes stopped. Only Earl's wheezing breath could be heard. Earl took a heavy, threatening step toward Ali. His shadow swallowed Ali whole. This was his dump, and he didn't like this uninvited guest. He snarled with that thick voice the whole gym could hear. "This ain't your playground, Clay. No dancing here, no poetry reading here. Here, bones get broken, men get wasted. You're in the wrong place, kid." Ali didn't flinch. He was as relaxed as if there wasn't a 125-kilo angry giant in front of him. He loosened his shoulders slightly, cracked his neck left and right. And he answered without taking his eyes off Earl for a second. His voice wasn't shouting, but it was so full it echoed in your chest. "Bending iron isn't a skill, Big Earl. Anyone can bend iron. The skill is not letting that iron touch you." Earl laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the arrogant laugh of a man in love with his own power, belittling the man across from him. The laugh mixed with a flagging wheeze from his lungs. He asked mockingly, "Touch? That's your problem, champ. You just touch. You score points. You run. Me? I go right through." Earl raised his right arm and flexed that massive bicep. Muscle fibers moved under the skin like live, angry snakes, coiling and knotting. His arm was thicker than a normal person's leg. Eyes shining, he yelled, "Look at this! 125 kilos of pure mass. The law of physics is simple. The big one crushes the small one. You got no mass. You just got wind, and wind can't knock down mountains." Everyone in the gym held their breath. Time froze. Everyone waited for a joke from Ali, a rhyme. But Ali wasn't a poet today. Today, he was a professor. And the subject of the lesson was painful truths. Ali started putting on his gloves slowly, with great seriousness. The sound of the Velcro ripped through the silence like fabric tearing. Without lifting his head, he murmured like a teacher. "You think wind can't knock down mountains, Earl? What do you think carved the Grand Canyon? Water and wind. Patience and speed. You're a rock. You're hard, yeah. But you're standing still. You're rigid. And anything that stands still, no matter how big, eventually crumbles. The hard breaks. The flexible survives." The smile on Earl's face froze. Ali's calmness, this fearlessness, was getting on his nerves. He spit on the floor and shouted, "Theory. That's all word salad made up by cowards. Show me the truth. What can you do to that bag? Can you make it fly like I do? Can you break its chains? Or are you just going to dance around it and read it poetry?" Ali finished putting on his gloves. He slowly moved in front of the heavy bag. That poor bag Earl had nearly destroyed moments ago, covered in deep dents. Ali didn't touch the bag. He just stood there, planted his feet. He stopped the bag swinging with his hands. When he spoke, his voice was now a whisper but full of threat. "Power," W said, "is not pushing something like you think, Earl. You push the bag. The bag runs away. The energy gets lost in the air. That is waste. Real power is keeping the energy inside, not letting it escape." Earl crossed his arms over that massive chest. "Get out of here," he said. "Show us so we can laugh." Ali didn't take a stance, didn't bounce, didn't dance. He just brought his right hand close to the bag. Do you know what the distance was? A span. Just 25 centimeters. It was impossible to generate speed or power for a punch from that distance. Everyone was confused. Earl was grinning, thinking, you couldn't even kill a fly from that distance. Every eye in the gym was on that tiny gap. Time slowed down. The sound of the fans faded away. Only Ali's calm breathing through his nose could be heard. And then, something happened that the eye couldn't even follow. Ali's shoulder trembled slightly. In a tenth of a second, his hand shot forward like a cobra. The sound wasn't loud like Earl's hit. This sound was very different, like a dry log suddenly snapping, or a high-caliber pistol going off inside. Crack! The sound was so sharp, so high-pitched that everyone flinched. It scratched at their ears. But the terrifying part was the bag. That bag that flew and swung when Earl hit it. When Ali hit it, it didn't even move. It just shivered where it hung, like it was having a violent seizure, like thousands of volts of electricity were pumped into it. And the back of the bag, I mean the exact opposite side of where Ali hit, suddenly bulged out, like an invisible hand inside was trying to claw its way out through the sand and sawdust. Like a bomb had gone off in the heart of the bag. Deathly silence fell over the gym. Earl's eyes looked like they were going to pop out of his head. He frowned. His brain couldn't process what he was seeing. The laws of physics had been violated right in front of his eyes. He stammered, "You missed." The bag didn't even move. Just touched it. Jew. Ali lowered his glove. He had the expression of a teacher who just solved a difficult problem. He shot a look that pierced right through Earl's soul, and he slapped him with the cold truth. The bag didn't move because the energy couldn't find a way out, Earl. When you hit, the bag runs, it escapes. When I hit, the energy got trapped inside. The shockwave stabbed into the sand and tried to exit out the back. If that bag was a human, they'd look fine on the outside, but their insides would be turned to soup right now. Earl shook his head. He didn't believe it. He didn't want to believe it. The belief in mass that he had dedicated his whole life to was shaking. He yelled, "Trick! It's a magic trick! The human body ain't a sandbag, Clay. I got muscles. I got bones. I'm made of steel." Earl pulled up his sweat-soaked t-shirt. The sight was intimidating. His abs were lined up like paving stones. They were covered in thick veins. He took a deep breath, tightened himself, turned his body into a stone fortress. He roared a challenge. "Come on, do what you did to the bag to me, right here, on the stomach. Let's see if your trick works on me." This was madness. A 105-kilo giant was telling Ali, "Hit me." He was trusting the walls of his castle, that armor he thought was indestructible. Ali stepped in front of Earl. The distance was that same deadly distance, one span. Ali slowly took off his glove, made a fist with his bare hand. This wasn't disrespect. This was so the lesson would be understood better. Ali leaned toward Earl. His voice was as cold as a gravedigger's, as sharp as a knife. "Don't hold your breath, Earl. If you breathe out, it'll hurt. But if you hold it, the air in your lungs gets compressed. Your body can't absorb the shockwave. You'll explode from the inside. Let your breath go." Earl didn't listen. Out of stubbornness, he closed his eyes, clenched his teeth, locked himself up. "Hit me," he snarled through his teeth. Ali planted his foot, locked his eyes on Earl's exact sensitive spot, his diaphragm, and he pulled the trigger. Nobody saw the punch go. It was so fast, it disappeared from sight. They only heard the sound, boom, like a wet, heavy towel being slammed onto a marble floor with full force. A thud, dull, chilling, the sound of flesh and bone shaking. Earl didn't fly back, didn't fall. His feet didn't leave the ground. For the first second, nothing happened. Earl was still standing, still tensed. Everyone thought Ali's hit hadn't worked. A few people started giggling, whispering. "See, Earl took it," they said. But then biology kicked in. Earl's face started to change. Within seconds, it turned from red to purple, from purple to a dead gray. His eyes. His eyes looked like they were going to jump out of his head. They went bloodshot, bulging out. His mouth opened wide, like a fish flopping out of water trying to catch air. His mouth formed a perfect, terrifying O shape. But no sound came out, because there was no air left in his lungs. Ali's punch had pierced that armor, gone inside, and shut down Earl's system. His body had forgotten how to breathe. The shockwave had reached all the way to his spine. Earl's massive, pillar-like legs started to tremble. His kneecaps knocked together, and that 105-kilo mountain, Bayanju, collapsed onto his knees in slow motion, like a building crumbling from its foundations. His hands went to his stomach, like he was trying to close an invisible hole open there. He dug his fingernails into his own flesh. There was only one sound in the gym now. The terrible, painful wheeze Earl made trying to take a breath. Ali stood over the giant writhing on the floor. He didn't make a victory sign, didn't laugh, didn't say, "I told you so." He just had the coolness of a scientist who had conducted a successful experiment in the lab. Ali knelt down. He put his hand on Earl's trembling, sweaty shoulder. This wasn't consolation. This was the final lecture note. He spoke with a tone that was compassionate but unshakable, like a father explaining life to his son. "Your armor was too thick, Earl. You were too hard. But you forgot one thing. Water always leaks through the cracks. The hard breaks. Water finds a way. No matter how much muscle you build. We are all just meat and blood. The human body is just a bag of water." Ali stood up, picked up his white towel from the floor, threw it over his shoulder, and started walking toward the exit with those silent steps. Behind him, he left a giant still trying to breathe, groaning, and 20 men who couldn't believe their eyes, struck dumb. When the door closed, the only sound inside was the spinning of the fans, and everyone understood that day. Muhammad Ali floating like a butterfly wasn't a show. It wasn't cowardice. He was a master who knew exactly when, where, and how the bee would sting. That day, Earl Thompson waited exactly 8 minutes to get up from the floor. That day, not just his breath, but his entire belief system, his whole world had been destroyed. And for the rest of his life, he never called anyone just fast again. Because that day, he felt deep in his lungs, in his very bones, just how deadly, how destructive the power of speed really was.